Hi everyone, thanks for checking in. It's Adam here at Low & Co Realty, and today we're looking at the Wellington real estate market for the month of March and comparing it to the last couple of years and looking at the trends and seeing what we can learn. In summary, folks, Wellington values were down again in March. We showed some promise in February, but March was pretty soft again, unfortunately. Overall message to sellers is there's just been a lot of supply out there, and so that makes it very, very tough to compete for the attention of the limited pool of buyers when there's an awful lot of choice for the buyers to choose from. And so you have to fight that extra bit harder to get their attention to your listing. That makes it a bit tougher, of course. Message for buyers, therefore, conversely, is it's great. Great news for buyers. There is so much choice out there. I encourage you to make the most of these conditions and get in amongst it while the buying is this good. So let's get into the detail. Median sale price, March 2025, 800,000 versus 820,000 a year ago. That's down 2%, up a bit, down a bit. If you look at that red line, you'll see there that, as I keep saying, month after month, roughly prices have been broadly stable since about the middle of 2022. We saw a big drop from late 2021 to mid 2022, and since then it's gone roughly sideways, round that $800,000 mark, a little bit less, and so on. So look, the trend is broadly sideways, but if you follow these videos, you'll know that I don't pay too much attention to the median sale price, because it doesn't just reflect the underlying values, which of course is what we're all interested in. It also reflects the mix of properties sold during that month. So the best guide, in my view, into underlying values is the Real Estate Institute House Price Index. So let's look at the detail on that front. Start here with what I call the league tables, and since late 2021, early 2022, Wellington market has really performed worst out of all areas in the country, and this continues to be the case, unfortunately. So we have the auspicious privilege of leading the league tables in the worst possible way, in that Wellington market has fallen further since the peak than any other market. So you'll see they're 24.5% down in March compared to where we were at the peak in October 2021. Auckland also has fared pretty badly at almost 21% down. Everywhere else hasn't fared quite so badly. So Auckland and Wellington cities have done reasonably poorly since the peak. Over the last year, you'll see Wellington, last month I reported that Wellington was no longer seeing the biggest drop over the last 12 months. Unfortunately, we are back to being in the position of having the biggest drop in the last 12 months at just over 4% there, compared to Auckland and New Zealand overall at down by 0.7%. And indeed, over the last 3 months, we are also leading the league table. So unfortunately, Wellingtonians, I'm afraid to say that we're the biggest loser, if you like, across the board across all different time frames. In terms of underlying values, unfortunately, for the time being at least. Let's look now at the chart there. So you can see, look, the general pattern is that early 2022, coming out of the boom there, we fell precipitously in value. Then we recovered during late 2022 to the mid sort of 2023, until the election. Things got better. From the election, we had a ton of stock come to market. That made it harder again, and the market fell away again. We saw some signs of life, potential improvement, late-ish 2024, and indeed we saw a nice positive uptick in February of this year, just a month or so ago, but unfortunately in March it's come back down again, so renewed softness. So over the last year, you can see there that Wellington weak across the various regions in the last 12 months to varying degrees. But gee, look at Wellington City, down by nearly 7% in the last 12 months. So the city seems to be being hit the hardest here, perhaps something to do with the soft labour market in the public sector for the city in particular, but nonetheless, across the board in the Wellington region, everywhere is suffering over the last 12 months or so. Over the last 3 months, you can see there, generally softness, but Porirua City just ahead at 0.6%, and some parts are not too far from zero, but again Wellington City down 1.3%. And over the last 1 month you see there at 1.9%. So if you look at the graph there for Wellington City, as is normally the case, you see it's more of a sawtooth pattern, higher highs, deeper troughs, but overall the pattern is the same as the region. And you can see there, as per the region, we had a strong February, but then unfortunately a weak March again. So let's look at the other metrics. New listings coming to the market. So 929 in March versus 878 a year ago and 663 2 years ago. So this is a big, a strong showing on the listing front. New listings slightly ahead of last year, but a massive 40% increase on 2 years ago. And you can see again, look at the red line there, the red bar, the red 6-month average there. See, listing volumes went right up after the election into 2024. Then second half 2024 came off again, and in the last few months we've seen them increase again. Some of that is seasonal, of course. We see a lot of listings coming to market typically in February and March. But compared to what's normal in March, what we've seen this year at 929 is even above average. So it's not just compared to the last few months that it's been strong, but compared to what's normal in March, it is also quite a lot of listings. If we compare, look there at the graph on the other basis, comparing the results to 12 months ago, as you can see there, slightly ahead of 12 months ago, but not nearly to the same degree as we have been seeing over the last 15 months or so, where we've seen massive increases compared to 12 months prior. So maybe things are normalising. From a seller's perspective, what we want to see, of course, is the new listings coming to the market slowing down. That makes it better for sellers, moving away from benefiting the buyers in the market. What about number of sales? 781 in March this year versus 722 a year ago and 609 2 years ago. And interestingly, this is really encouraging because, again, as a seller, what you want to see is good, strong sales taking place. And one thing I'm really encouraged by here on this graph is you look at that red moving average again, and you'll see we were at really very low levels in sort of 2022, early 2023. Since then, it has been increasing. It has been increasing slowly, don't get me wrong. It's been a very gradual movement, but it has been quite a consistent movement. And this result in March at 781 is the second highest month since November 2021. So it's really encouraging, a strong month in terms of number of sales. So let's hope that continues. However, even though it's a lot of sales compared to what we've seen in recent years since the end of the boom, we are still not quite back up to what's long-term normal for the month of March. So 781 sales versus what's long-term normal at 835. So it's still sort of 5 or 6 or 7% or so below what's normal for the month. How long does it take to sell? So 36 days in March, same as a year ago. A big reduction on 2 years ago, which was 49 days. So 13 days shorter on average compared to 2 years ago. When we look at what's normal over a long period of time for March, it's still slower, longer than normal at 33 days. So 36 days versus 33. Again, if you look at the blue bar chart there, you can see that 33 days is quite a bit less, shorter duration to sell than we've seen for some months now. So that's positive news. And indeed, the red moving average charts shows that we were increasing throughout 2024. The last few months, we've seen a decrease overall in the long-term moving average. So, positive showing on that front. 36 days, still longer than average, but it's considerably shorter than most months we've seen over the last kind of year and a half or so. Inventory, 16 weeks worth of supply versus 13 weeks a year ago, so that's a softening in the market, and 16 weeks 2 years ago. So the same amount of supply in terms of number of weeks worth of supply as 2 years ago, and a bit longer than 1 year ago. Interestingly, 16 weeks is only 1 week longer than the long-term average of 15 weeks. So on that basis, we are in broadly a balanced market. It sure does not feel like a balanced market though, and that maybe is best reflected by the fact that over the last 10 years, the average inventory has been 10 weeks or just over 10 weeks. So at 16 weeks worth of inventory, it feels a lot tougher a market than has typically been the case, which has been just over 10 weeks worth of supply. Trade me listings, 3,331 as of a few days ago versus 3,040 a year ago, 2,765 2 years ago. So a bit more supply than a year ago and quite a bit more supply than we saw 2 years ago. Again, look at the graph there. Broadly speaking, we have not seen the levels of supply on Trade Me in Wellington at these numbers since early-ish 2015. So roughly speaking, it's been 10 years since we've seen this much supply on the market. Fantastic for buyers. You've got more to choose from than you have had for 10 years, basically. Conversely, bad news for sellers. It makes it harder for you to compete for the buyers that are out there and to get their attention to your listing to get it sold. Again, there you can see it in a different format compared to 12 months ago. We're still ahead of where we were 12 months ago in terms of the amount of supply on the market, but we're ahead by a much smaller degree. So hopefully that is normalising, and hopefully soon we will start to see things reduce in the number of stocks. Hopefully, of course, that is from a seller's perspective. As a buyer, you of course want to maintain this level of choice. So look, in summary, folks, Wellington values are down versus 12 months ago, and especially the case in Wellington City. New listings are up, but only by a small amount compared to 12 months ago. Sales volumes are also up compared to 12 months ago, and particularly strong in March, the second strongest month for sale volumes than we've seen since the end of the boom in November 2021. Duration to sell is up lately compared to a year ago, but down on recent months. And only a little bit ahead of what's long-term normal. Inventory levels versus 12 months are about the same, but down in the last few months. Trade Me listings up, but again down seasonally in April. As we come out of summertime, we often see listing volumes come down. Overall, folks, the message for sellers is that values continue to be quite soft in March. There's just too much supply for the market to be firm. Conversely, of course, if you're a buyer, that's great news. There's a huge amount to choose from, so get in amongst it. As usual, thanks to Real Estate Institute and realestate.co.nz for all the data. Thanks to you for checking in, and of course, if you want individualised advice, please feel free to reach out. Adam here at Low & Co. Thanks, and see you next month. Cheers.